Bling bling. Okay, cool. I guess that's live now. So it was good last time. Actually, the caddy intro was, thanks for that because I went through on one of these other projects that I'm working on, and it's using either Apache or Nginx as the case may be, right? And some of their Apache is still legacy, Apache prefork with mod PHP, which is bulletproof, right? But you're not gonna get to 600 requests a second on something like that. There's only so much you can do when you throw more hardware at it. You still got all these processes, and then we'd have to still have some Nginx in the equation because some of the stuff on the front end wants to make some WebSocket connects to the back end, and that and prefork is like not really compatible, right? So we ended up with this, like I would call it a tangled mess of Nginx doing the statics that it has, Nginx doing reverse proxy to some WebSocket provided services, Nginx doing some stuff itself with PHP's FPM mechanism, CGI, and then some stuff getting routed to, the backend Apache prefork PHP services. And there's another thing in the back end on this one that's a Django API. But, why choose a simple tech stack when you can just smash a bunch of stuff together and put Nginx in front so folks on the outside don't ever really know the difference?
The way to make it simple is by choosing all of them.
I mean, I guess. But the caddy in the demo, in the test beta, workshop environment, in the lab environment, we were able to throw this. It's one config now for caddy, and it does the statics just like we want, and it has the multiple site handling, and it's routing the stuff to the. Right now we have it rigged so that it's routing to the back end, reverse proxying into the Django mechanism and the Apache prefork. But the thing that we are planning on we think we're going to be able to move forward is actually that Apache prefork stuff can move into being FPM based PHP thing. There's a little bit of we need to figure out how to run different instances of PHP FPM.
Right.
Because one is this version, one is this other version, right? So we still have this requirement, like this one is on 7.4. It is not ready for PHP 8. This one is PHP 8. It's ready to rock and roll. There's, this is just you build the thing and then it gets old, right? Yeah. And interestingly enough, the legacy is not really the right word, but the older app that exists on PHP 7.4 is a good thing to highlight, today's topic, vendor-driven churn / the 300% problem. I have that blog post up here, and I'll just sort of, I guess, remember to put a link to it in the notes. IVR Lee Briggs, from some guy from the UK. Briefly, he talks about this thing, the 300% problem. You can't just learn one thing and then be done with it. We can't just deploy to AWS. You can't just upgrade from PHP 7.4 to 8.2 without some other unknown at the moment, thing cropping up is kind of what happens. And it becomes this problem multiplier.
Yeah.
And I had been calling this kind of mechanism in my own head vendor-driven churn. I want to just make quick update to my DNS entry, but I sign into my AWS console and my UI is different because I don't sign in every day, right? And then I have to navigate over to this thing, and now the UI is slightly different. And where do I go to do this? I mean, I know DNS. Why can't you guys just hand me the text file and I'll edit it?
And then a bind zone file, right?
Right. And then I upload it, and you just like pre-flights check the file to make sure that it's not ridiculous. And then I'm deployed, and that worked 20 years ago. And now I can't just edit a file and save and reload. I'm clicking through a dozen different things. One of the frustrating times of this vendor-driven churn bullshit, I had to sign into my AWS to do something. But you've just enabled MFA, and now you don't have your thing, and you don't have your key. And is your key on this device? Do you have your authenticated code on your mobile phone that's with you because you're on your laptop and you're away, but you saved your code on your Prime workbox because, reasons. And, I just wanted to get into Amazon to do something. It obligated me to do the MFA. I set up the MFA so I could get in this time. I saved my stuff here, but I was done with my task of updating the DNS. And I had this new task of grab the TOTP codes and put them into your authenticator on your mobile device, put them on your second box, put them in your normal archive. Okay, made it that far, made it into my primary one, but my primary one is not visible to me when I'm thousands of miles away. Well, not trivially available to me. Oh, I'm so far away. Let me just get onto my VPN into that network, connect over to the box, look at the stuff, do the things, get my MFA code.
And if your VPN's down, fine, you SSH into your private bastion host that has access, and from there you SSH tunnel, or you just SSH in and find the files. But I'm
going to tell you something.
Right. It's all because I might have lost my phone, but I still need to log into AWS
or my bank.
My battery has died. Whatever it is,
sent me one of those little things. And so every time now I go on vacation, I want to leave the office and do something somewhere, and that little key that's on my desk all the time, I had to take that little key that's on my desk with me when I'm traveling, because every sign in is like, you have to do this key gizmo.
Yep.
When I sign in from this box right here, that never happens. But if I lose that thing, I'm basically like hosed, for banking until they send me a new one. And they did send me a new one. And I shit you not, bro. They sent me a new one. It sends in a FedEx overnight. There's a hole in the package. There's the paper in there that says we've sent you the new key, but the hole in the package and the damn key fell out. So I didn't get a new keys. So my old key's running out of time, In fact, the old key, I still have the old key. It says off, right? But I didn't have the new key. And I'm like, oh crap. I'm gonna be totally locked out. And and this is all just extra crap I have to do the crap I want to have to do.
Right.
Now I'm all the way over here to pick on this 7.4 PHP 7.4 app, which is, in great shape. It's working. It's making money. Who really wants to mess with it? Well, we don't want to run 7.4 anymore. Although I still have a client that I work with that has a PHP 5 app that is still in use in their facility, making money.
The only PHP I'm still running, last year, maybe it's the year before, I finally invested the time in moving it up to, I think probably about 7.4 actually.
Debian Bullseye or whatever.
It was a large lift. I mean, there was a lot of, even for this, well, very, very old. I mean, this thing started out probably PHP 2. So the last time it had been updated was for PHP 5. Somebody else had done a 7 lift, but it didn't support the modifications I'd made to it. This is a dead open source project, So, but of course it still worked.
Still works when you're running 5.4.
Yeah, right.
But you upgrade and then you've got to like fiddle a bunch of stuff.
But I wanted to run it in Docker, and I wanted to put it in a new environment so I could get it off of the machine that was installed in 2004 that had been running on, and get it a little bit more manageable, so that in getting PHP 5 running in Docker was really painful. So it was easier to spend the week porting this thing forward to 7.
I mean, I agree that's the right choice there, is move it forward when you can. So the folks I know who are still running the 5.4, 5. something app, that one started off as a deploy on a bare metal in their facility, right? Like they set up a Debian machine, put Apache, put the thing, got it rolling. We're like, here we go. And somebody internally who's not a developer, was like, oh, I can drop PHP files and interact with the database on a web server. Like, let's build our own internal tooling that we use and does this very simple thing, generates a nice HTML page that comes out that almost every single time fits on a single piece of paper and generates this printed document that is that organization's very valuable work product. That's right. That piece of paper and the work that's necessary to generate that piece of paper. But that piece of paper, they bill like $4,000 for. And they make a couple of these pieces of paper on a daily basis. They're like, oh, so the last time I talked to them, our server crashed. Help us recover all of the stuff off there. Fairly easy. You just pull the stuff off the drive. The drive wasn't corrupted or anything. The server just like fell over the hardware. I didn't bother to do any diagnostics. When they called me up, it was like, hey, we got the server. It's dead. We got the drive out. It looks like it has stuff on it. Can you help us set this new thing up? We have a new server. Just move it on there. Well, their new server's running various services on it, already an existing web server, so we can't put Apache on there. It's got a newer version. Okay, we'll have to maybe we'll have to do something, but probably not there. Apache's mature and very stable. Doesn't wiggle too much from like 2.0 to 2.4. But we have PHP 5.4 on this thing. The bare metal server we want you to go on is running 7.2 or whatever Debian had popular in 2 Debians ago. Maybe that was Debian 10. Are we on 11? The one before Bullseye, I think, was Buster. Anyways, we have that. It's 7.2. So this thing's not compatible. It's probably compatible with the necessary tweaking of the PHP configs, maybe a little bit of updating some stuff, in terms of some routines used to be able to pass a null in or an empty string or an empty array, and it would do the right thing. PHP would allow a lot of slot back in the day. And now it says, nope, you can't pass in a null. You have to pass in an array or it must be a string.
Right.
Sometimes there's some other stuff there, although that's not so heavy and that type requirement is not so heavy in 7, but it is definitely in 8. So then we had to do the thought process, like, what are we going to do? We put it to make it work as easy as possible for us without any fights with Docker. We just made a new VM and made a new VM with this very old Debian with 5.4, the legacy Apache, put the thing up, on this box. It's got a proxy server on the front end that now proxies to this thing. We had to change 1 or 2 lines of code at the top of the thing so it knew where it was, right? Because now I'm on a reverse proxy. I'm not bare metal. I can't use things like environmental variable of my server name to tell me who I am because my server name is wrong and is not my externally visible origin. So we just couple lines of code, fixed that problem sorted. Then they said, well, we should upgrade this to 7 dot whatever, which was the thing at the time. Said, oh, sure, we could do that. We'll get to it when we get to it. And now it's not going to 7. Now it would be, let's go to 8. So now we'll get to it when we get to it. There's been some interest added, let's say, right?
Right.
That's a little rough. So then that one basically froze. They avoided this vendor-driven churn. They avoided a 300% type problem because they didn't bother to really get in and didn't do anything. The easiest work is nothing, right? I mean, put it in a new VM and done. And how often I have had to do that for folks, I think
if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? I mean,
spend some time at some larger organizations, and I spend some time at I would say they are small and medium-sized businesses where there's not 8 people on the tech team, there's 2, and one of them's been at the company for like 20 years, knows everything about all the systems off the top of the dome, stuff like this. And then the other person's been there for like a year or two, and this is their stair step job into, you know, being their own IT manager or something. And they end up having to do a lot of that outsourcing, like, hey, code us up our app real quick. Hey, patch this app that somebody who worked here wrote so that it's like less crashy or whatever, those kinds of things. And I see really a lot of, let's just keep this legacy system moving forward. Let's just keep this legacy system moving forward. Let's just set up a VM, let's set up VirtualBox on they got upgraded desktop computer, but they had this really legacy app from their old machine that they were running that was still a Windows 95. Let's just put Windows 95 in a VM, and that's how you use that app now. It's like you can copy and paste through the clipboard through VirtualBox. You know, it's sort of an awkward experience for someone, but you know, the staff spends 3 or 4 days getting used to, oh, I run that app in that other app. Cool. Double click VBox, double click this. Now I can double click bespoke proprietary app that we wrote that runs in Windows 95, but was originally written for DOS, right? Start Windows 95, then open the terminal window and full screen it, and that's what you're doing, right? Tab to move between fields. Don't type in any exotic characters. You know, still only supports a two-digit year, so it still thinks everything's happening in 1925. So, you know, they're avoiding that churn, but these other folks that I'm working with now have the 7.4 PHP, and it's Dockered, so that's cool. And they want to move it to 8.2 or whatever's on the latest Debian, which I think is 8.2 or it's 8. Something anyways. You know, and we couldn't just, oh, well, let's upgrade the PHP engine and everything's done. Nah, it starts throwing barf everywhere. Right. Deprecated this, deprecated that, warning here. Type hints got slightly more strict, which is a good thing, but the code wasn't ready for that kind of stuff. They did some pretty sloppy things with regards to namespacing in there. So, fun mechanisms like Composer don't work as tidy as they should be to like build the big auto load list. They had this other thing now. Oh, well, we've upgraded this. Guess what? We went to 8.2. We'll have all these dependencies. So my dependency that I use to connect to or generate QR codes, I got to upgrade that library. But that library, when it moves from its compatible to PHP 8 version, now I've got, it's got a new API interface. It doesn't, the old way was really static classes and functional, and now the new one's all OO. That's just a contrived example, but stuff like that happens. This one's changed some method procedures. This one's got the new thing. This one's got the new thing. So now you have to upgrade your dependency A, B, C, D, E, so that they're compatible. Now you got to upgrade your own code to be compatible with your dependencies, as well as, you know, the engine that you just moved to. And as if PHP 7 to 8 is the only time that this happened, you know, my least favorite experience with this vendor-driven churn was the early React stuff.
Oh yeah.
Oh gosh.
Changing like every week was.
Yeah, on a sort of a side project. You know, I was just trying to help someone who's getting into coding, doing front end stuff. And there's this other front end UI I like called Riot, which is very much a React-like thing. Build a little custom component, throw it in the web page, and it's all JS controlled, and it renders itself nicely. Does its thing. Great. And you know, I was sort of just saying like, well, there's React and there's these like Preact, and you could have Svelte and you could have Vue and you could have blah, blah, blah. Riot was one of the ones in the list. I pointed this group at, oh, try Riot. It seems to be moving less quickly, which is true, or at least it was true. And then guess what? Even that one that was trying to be narrower scope than what React does still ends up moving from like Riot 2 to Riot 3 to Riot 4, which are like mostly the same. And then we got stuck with a thing that was like, oh, no. You got to go into every one of these tag files that you make and just make sure to add export default to every single thing.
Right.
You know, and oh, that's fine. It's no big deal. It's only 100 components. Let's just run that in there. I don't know. What's the worst? I don't know. The prime driver of the vendor-driven churn is those fucking OS manufacturers keep producing new versions.
We had a build failure that started happening on one of our C++ apps that it would only happen in debug, which of course it's not like you can't build and debug because, you know, this thing's hundreds of thousands of lines of code with hundreds of developers supporting it. And so you have to have debug builds because we use the debug objects all the time in development. We don't ship them to production, but we've got to run. We can't run development without debug, without dev, right?
Are you going to debug without debug?
Yeah. And this happened when Red Hat had updated a library, and we're picking it up down CentOS land, I guess. But we're running CentOS and all of this stuff, but we also have Red Hat support contracts across the organization, so it's not like they're out of reach. And they'd updated a library for the debug for the debug build. I forget what it was now, but I know that package had changed. And the reason I know that package had changed is because I reversed the update, right? So we applied updates, did the things, and we were stuck at that point. And I had to go and build a box and back out packages and install old versions of packages until I could figure out what broke, right? Till I could actually get a working build again, going back toward the original target, isolate what caused it to break, go up to Red Hat and tell them, hey, let's open a ticket. Let's let them know that they've broken this. And they're like, great, give us your code.
That's a little rough.
I'm not giving you a 25-year-old game platform. Sorry. I can't. We can talk to our legal team and see how long this takes to get approved, but that's not going to happen. So our solution ended up being that we had to fork GCC.
Come on.
So we forked the GCC RPM, right? And all of the other, and the couple of other RPMs that we needed to patch to apply our patch so our code would build, which it built before. And then because we're doing this at the RPM level, which still made sense based on all the way we needed to distribute these changes,
right?
That meant we had to rebuild, we had to make world the entire RPM tree because everything depends on GCC.
Everything does. I use Gentoo on my desktop, and there's a thing that occurs every few years that is a profile update. Like I was on 15, then I was on 17, then I was on 21, and a new one came out. And big things happen in the whole file system space across the whole universe of the Linux world. Merging user so that we're getting rid of /bin. Like the FHS specifications or standards or suggestions have changed since 2015, you know, and now my Gentoo update, and this is the same Gentoo box I've been running for. It's effectively the same Gentoo box. It started off as a 32-bit box. And because Gentoo, you know, you have to rebuild all your shit, like all your shit all the time, had a mechanism where I was not able to promote this box itself from a 32-bit box to a 64-bit box by itself. But I, you know, because how am I going to do all this compiling 64-bit ready when I'm still 32-bit kernel, but I'm on 64-bit hardware? So I had to, you know, boot from an external system rescue CD, which was actually on a USB. System rescue CD goes in the thing, gives me the 64-bit kernel, and then you're able to like move some stuff and then, you know, mount the thing and then change root into the other system. And now I'm using these Gentoo tools, and they're compatible because my kernel can run 32-bit shit, and I have 32-bit shit. on that box. But now I'm like in the Gentoo space. And so I say, so you run like, you run one emerge of like some of the core tools, glibc, gcc. There's like, I can't remember them off the top of my head. There's 3 things that I had to rebuild. And then one of those 3, and now they're all 64 bits and smart. And then I had to take another one of those things and rebuild it again to be built with itself. I probably was GCC. Build the GCC, build the other things that it likes, glib and libc, then rebuild GCC again. And then it was still having to build it in multi-lib mode, so it would support 32 and 64-bit. And then you say emerge world, and then that rebuilds GCC and all of that shit a third time, and takes forever. But you know, this is the life we chose. And then I think I ran that multi-lib one for a bunch of years, and then there was another one where like, oh, you want to switch and get rid of multi-lib, so you're only 64 bits only, which I had to delay because of some 32-bit crap I needed to work on, but not anymore. And then it was like rebuild everything to drop multi-lib support. Which, boy, I think that only happened in like 2017 or something like that. And then there was another big profile update on here, which changes a bunch of the default build flags, lots and lots of other stuff. Some things in the file system had changed. But to Gentoo's credit, these upgrades work more successfully for me than any Ubuntu upgrade I have ever done. Like every Ubuntu upgrade has like had a terrible problem, and I reboot the machine and it comes back up and something didn't complete, or some config is weird, or something, and you gotta like, oh, look, it left all these old packages in there and you have to like undo them. Somehow they got installed but not upgraded. Weird stuff like this. I had 2 boxes that were like identical Ubuntu servers circa 2020. Update this one and it bounced it and it comes back up and everything was fine. I was like, oh, wow, I'm finally good at this one. And then I do the same stuff on the other box and it won't like start running, and it's got some complaints about like file system permissions and weird stuff, and it's like, how the shit did that even happen? You know, to Gentoo's credit, emerge world, I mean, I got a beefy machine now, it takes all day,
right? But
mine runs through most of the time I got to do that. You know, the time it doesn't work is it crapped out rebuilding the kernel because it had done 3 kernel updates and filled up my boot partition with, you know, because it doesn't delete the old ones and it's saving them. So now I've ran out of space on boot partition. Okay, that I feel like is on me because I started this update process with not enough room on my boot partition for a new kernel. Okay, silly me. Maybe the package manager should check. Maybe. Sure. But I've been using Gentoo for more than 15 years. So really, I'm like, oh, I should know better because this is a very manual distribution.
Right.
Compared to, I use Debian in all my production everywhere else. You know, the Ubuntu shop, that was somebody else's choice. My own choices are, I'll put Debian. Which incidentally has had the smoothest upgrades ever. Every time I have to do one of those, they're like, you should start another shell in case this thing has a problem. Fuck no. Let's go. In fact, you know what? I'm going to hit enter and then I'm going to start drinking. You know, I know this is going to work out. And yeah, I guess it generally does, except for weird where my app layer comes down to it. But this is all the way down to not yours, but Lee Briggs' 300% problem. To successfully get the app in production, I got to know the app as an expert. I got to know my deployment infrastructure. They say deployment target as an expert. and I got to know the method for deploying, also sort of at an expert level, because my deployment isn't drop a PHP file into the web root and I'm running.
Right.
We're 20 something years away from that being reasonable. You know, you don't just update like.php and now millions of people clicking the button have your code changed. It doesn't work that way.
Somewhere from, okay, I've committed my change. Now I push my change. My change goes somewhere. My change.
Well, it's got to run through your CI to CD pipeline.
Right.
Then it's got to go to this. Maybe it goes to your, what do they call them these days? Blue-green?
Sure.
Deployment.
Deploy, right.
Used to just say A, B, but hey, cool, man.
I know. It's all got to be colors now.
Well, you know, maybe, you know, I worked on a team where somebody got really mad about the choice of the terms blacklist and whitelist that had been in the code for like 20 years.
Gone through the blacklist, whitelist change and the master slave change, because you can't call a primary and a secondary a master and a slave. Yeah, I mean, that's fair.
I mean, that's what it.
But that's a lot of code to change.
It was a lot of code to change. You know, I think, you know, that's a problem. I understand that problem. Connotations, words matter. Words mean something and stuff like that. But I feel like sometimes the engineering work of, well, you know, can't we just leave this one and going forward we'll be doing stuff that is more inclusive? Like, there was a lot of work I observed at a bunch of places, like backporting changes that were primarily about feelings. Again, I respect feelings a lot. I was about that change. They said, we need you to sit here and implement that change. I said, yes, let's do it. It's not a black-white list anymore. It's the accept list and it's the reject list.
Those are
better words.
It was probably 6 months of work for the entire company to do the master slave blacklist, whitelist changes for a firewall.
Really?
Yeah.
Wild.
Because you've got documentation, you've got training, you've got the actual code, you've got to come up with new words.
The other 300%.
Right? We had a set of words that were standard, that everybody understood in this application what they meant. Right. Now you had to come up with all new sets of words for all of these things. Do we call this a block list and an allow list? But, you know, okay, I mean, we found words, right? We called them primaries and secondaries, but then again, you might have multiple secondaries. What do you call it when you have 3 or 4 secondaries?
Read replica.
Yeah, but it's a firewall.
Oh, I don't know. Left, server on the left and server on the right. FWL and FWR.
Secondary 1, secondary 2. Wait a minute. Okay, secondary, tertiary. What happens when they change relationships? Who's second? Who's third? When it was slave, when it was slave, we were interchangeable, right? All the bad connotations, but the actual application of the term worked very well when we're talking about how a highly available set of firewalls or a highly available set of routers are working. There's a lot of human effort that goes into all of that.
There wasn't any breaking changes from any of this, right? Like, we moved all of our legacy code from legacy words with negative connotations. And it was just another little, I started off complaining about vendor-driven churn. And now we're like, well, this isn't even the vendors. Oh, this is not an OS update. You know, we did this one to ourselves.
Yep.
You know, I mean, I'm about it. You know, I spend a lot of time in the cannabis space. And terminology on the cannabis space is that you can't, it's not you can't, right? But marijuana is now negative term and has some negative connotations.
Sure.
And I don't fully understand them, you know, but I was at a standards group sit down and they're like, we got to say, don't spell marijuana with a J, don't spell marijuana with an H, call this thing cannabis. We should call it cannabis everywhere. You know, I think the only vendor-driven churn that put for me is a bunch of the state regulations went through and changed the agency's name to take marijuana out of the agency name, and now it says cannabis. And then a whole bunch of the data in the system, they used to classify stuff as, oh, that's usable marijuana. Now it's classified as usable cannabis. And there's spots where interacting with those systems, you don't give it some immutable identifier that represents usable marijuana or usable cannabis or whatever new term we are going to come up with later. Immutable thing that really means smokable flower.
Right.
Nope, you have to send it a text string that says, you know, usable space marijuana. Now you send it one that says usable space cannabis. If you send it the wrong one, you know, the system rejects it. You know, and that's hardly a 300% problem. You know, that was very much a, oh, string replace. The agencies in the cannabis space don't do a lot of, you know, we're going to do a staged deployment. We'll accept both words for 2
Right.
weeks.
Yeah.
And
But you still got
they're just like, hey, starting on Sunday night, we are going to do this thing. So everybody else who interacts with that agency is like, cool, cool, cool.
So the way we should do this is V1 of the API, this is V2 of the API, and V2 accepts cannabis, and V1 accepts marijuana, and the two don't mix.
Right.
You and then we put it in the date, we deprecate it, and then we depreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, but
but no one does that.
It doesn't happen that way a lot of the time.
Right.
You know, like
the right way and the way that our vendors enforce upon us.
Right. I mean, one of them, there's no API versioning at all. One of the other ones, they just like extend the API. You know, some of them you're just pushing JSON up and down, right? And so they're just like, hey, we'll add new fields. Fuck it. You know, because who cares, right?
It's good.
That'll work, no problem. You know, if you try to check, oh, I want to do a little schema validator, that causes a bit of a problem. You know, but you know, all of that stuff is just, how am I gonna? Sometimes I feel like, how am I gonna get forward when I spent today? I had a little project today for some web app that I helped some folks on, and it was to just go through their code. A new Chrome version came out. Somebody who doesn't need to be looking at the developer console in Chrome was looking at the developer console in Chrome. And it starts telling you, oh, this is deprecated, this is deprecated, this is deprecated. You know, cookie same site lax versus strict was one of those things that came up for the same group, because the same non-engineer looking at the dev console opens the dev console. Because, you know, showed them one time, here's how this dev console shows up. So if you are working on this app or our, you know, web deployed thing, and you want to see and help the engineers, if you find something, open the dev console and then take a screenshot, and it'll show a bunch of shit right there. That it'd be better if you could get a more complete bug report. But, you know, I am not expecting like a sort of senior manager to do that kind of thing.
I don't know how anyone debugs web problems anymore in the world where browsers hide URLs by default. So we don't even know what page you're on.
My browser shows me what URL I'm on.
Because you changed that config.
No, it's just Chrome out of the box.
Bro, are you sure? Because Chrome changed the default to so that it hides URLs. Now, maybe they unchanged the
I've got back, forward. Look at my screen here, man.
But there is a configuration for it.
There's my thing right there. I'm looking at your 300% problem.
And you have the config turned on.
I haven't changed any config on anything. I'm on Chrome 134, blah, 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 blah.
So this happened a couple of years ago. I actually had to fix it on a browser recently. I think when I set up a new laptop. Maybe on Linux they default it differently.
I don't use a different platform, so I would not know.
I don't remember what they call.
I don't even know where to look for it under here. Maybe you're thinking about I don't know, but I still have back, forward, reload, my URL bar, the little star, so I can put it.
It's the thing where they strip the HTTP off, and they strip the thing
Well,
off.
they don't take the whole URL off, but they do have HTTPS. That tricked me 2 days ago when we were doing the Caddy one. And I was like, oh, it's giving me an SSL error because Caddy hadn't got the cert yet, but it was trying to hit it on HTTPS. I go into the address bar, I took the S out, then I hit enter, and then my site loaded on that demo Caddy that we were doing. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Now it's working. And I was still assuming I'm on plain text. And then you're like, oh, yeah, and then you got SSL out of the box. I said, no, I didn't do anything. Blah, blah, blah. And then I go back into the URL, put the focus, and see, oh, look, the scheme is HTTPS. That was like wild. And it automatically fetched it. I did another test with Caddy, this other project's demo environment, or their sandbox deploy that we're working on. Wants to have, like, I think 16 different host names pointed at that one box, right? So I end up with this Caddy file that is way simpler than my Apache one.
Right.
The Apache one is a whole bunch of files. Each file is very, very big. Lots of stuff I got to set. And then on this one, it's like the 3 lines. Here's my host name. Here's my web root. Do a file server thing. Do the fast CGI. Do the fast CGI thing. Like 3 lines for every single one of those, and ran that one, you know, in the foreground when it first kicked on, and it took I would say 4, maybe 5 seconds to resolve all of the SSL certs that it needed to get for that host.
Yeah.
Took, but now every time I start, it's fast.
It does look like they took away the hiding the URL part. They hid it for a little bit, but it's view show full URLs, or it's in the view menu anyway. And it's the same thing that turns on and off.
I don't even have a view menu.
I don't know where Linux puts these things. You don't have a view menu. Where's your history menu?
Why do I want to know about the history? That is in the past.
Where file, where's your file menu, your profiles?
Do this. It comes ... off of
the stuff that's not there. The stuff that's not in the hamburger.
Bro, there is only hamburger.
Really?
This one also.
Like, where do you turn on and off your bookmarks bar? Because you have it turned off.
I do. Bookmarks and lists. Whoa.
Show bookmarks bar there. No, show bookmarks bar there.
But I don't
I wonder where
it's ugly.
Where's your Zoom at? Zoom is there.
There's Zoom.
I don't know. I don't know where they have it. If it's not, because I don't find it anywhere except in the view menu on Mac.
Whoa, look at this. Here's a feature. More tools. Name window. Get fucked. What did that do?
It probably doesn't help for incognito windows. It might show up in your window list, except you don't have a window menu.
I do have a window menu. Oh, sorry. I do the super key and tab, and then it tells me I have an on-screen display of what all my things are with the icon. And it has, so the title in the title bar is the 300% production project.
That's the tab.
But then the window title, when I'm like tabbing around the universe, has the profanity that I typed in.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. That is a neat feature. I wonder if it is not keyboard shortcuttable. That is disappointing because I've got like 20 open windows. It would be really awesome to be able
a Windows app that I was automating the other day. One interface of it was fully keyboard shortcuttable. So including the file menu, like you would always expect to be able to open the file menu, right? The next part of it. So the first part, I do that, and then it opens a new part. The new part has no keyboard shortcuts at all. File menu isn't accessible, nothing at all. None of them. And I'm like, oh. So I had to switch to pure screen macros at that point.
Ugh. Yeah, I don't see anything about hiding this, but also this Chrome profile is attached to my like managed Google domain for Edochio. So maybe that's something that gets set there. But anyway, so this mid-level manager gets to or
right click on your URL bar.
always show full URL. Look
at one point when that was turned off, it would hide everything after the first slash as well as everything before the first, in the protocol.
Yeah. Okay, well, I don't.
They must have changed the default on that, which was good, probably because it made debugging problems impossible.
It gets kind of difficult. I get a lot of reports that here's like a screenshot and it's only a part of a page, and I'm like, all of those components appear like in 6 different spots in the app. Like, which page are you on? They're like, well, I clicked on the thing. The thing. Yes. Why didn't you say so? But so they were doing this in the dev console, and it was like, here's deprecated this, deprecated this, deprecated this. And that was like some vendor-driven churn, just like going through this mostly front-end app to pull out spots where different themes are putting in various meta tags for Apple and meta tags for MS application. All that stuff's now more or less standardized. And then Chrome got updated. Chrome starts warning you about these other legacy web shits are deprecated. Then your management sees that and says, oh, well, we've got to fix this right now. This is the big bug we've got to look at because, well, what if our clients see this?
Right.
What if our clients who are also not technical visit a web app, open the inspector, and start seeing deprecated warnings in the console? Like, let's fix this. Team doesn't have time for it. I'd help them out, once or twice. They're like, hey, we need you to come in for like a couple hours, do this one little thing real quick. Like, oh, okay. I mean, on the one hand, all of this vendor-driven churn frustrates the heck out of me because now I'm doing this thing and I'm not making forward progress. I'm just sweeping up behind the thing again, sweeping up behind the thing again. But at the same time, it's nice to have somebody call up and say, I urgently need you to do this 4 hours worth of.
It's nice to be the person they call.
Yeah, tedious, not critical work, but we wanted to get it done because the person who writes the checks in the organization thinks that it needs to happen. But the technical lead is like, I can't take anybody off of anything else to have them muck about with that. Make a branch, clean that shit up, run it through CI, and if it checks out and you've done all that stuff and debug it, blah, 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 and then all that checks out, send me the patch, send me a bill, like, let's move on, and that's actually kind of handy. Being the person that they call anymore is a little difficult, man. There's a lot more people available to call in March 2025 than there was in, for example, March 2022, let's say, or pick some time in the past, I mean, just to reminisce a little, back in the old .com, blah, 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 blah. I was working Pioneer Square in Seattle. There was a Quiznos sandwich shop down there because Quiznos was blowing up about the same time. Yeah. There were people who worked at companies that didn't compete with each other, but 2 different companies. And lots of folks would end up at this Quiznos at the same time. And, at 11:30, nobody's there. At 11:35, the place is freaking crowded until 1:30, and then it's a ghost town again, right? So a couple times I was in there, and one of the folks in the story, the person who found a new job was at the moment on my team at company A. Not my subordinate or anything, just a person I worked with on the team. Nice guy. We're in Quiznos hanging out. Somebody is in line with somebody else on their team, blah, blah, blahing about something. And so my guy, Jeff, says, oh, hey, here's like something you should take a look at. Pay attention to blah, 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 blah when you're, trying to implement your own, search parameters for your own shit hack of a database mechanism you have. Try this stupid stuff that we've had to do in this circumstance. Like 2 weeks later, we're in the damn Quiznos again. she's the same dude. They're like, oh, that was really helpful. Thanks, blah, blah, blah. Hey, do you know about such and such? He's like, oh, yeah, of course I know such and such. Because, well, Jeff is like super good at databasey things. I should say specifically super good at MS SQL databasey things. They're like, oh, yeah, here's what you should do. You should do this. You should do this. So it tells them what to do. Oh, let me get your email if I can, maybe ask you a couple questions after this, like something. Man, I shit you not. Like 2 or 3 days later, Jeff comes in and he's just like, so today's my last day. I slid into this new gig, 20% pay rise, less hours. They're going to let me like not have to be in early like you guys want me to be, all this other stuff. And, everyone's like, so folks are all like mad. And I'm like, yo, Jeff, they hiring? I'll take a pay bump and not have to be there at 8 a.m. because somebody wants to have an all hands with a team that's remote that, oh, well, we'll be early to accommodate the remote team. Like, no, we're the ones paying the remote team. They should accommodate us. A rant for a different time. Anyways, this was, I think that's a wrap on this, 300% problem, vendor-driven churn. Nothing to be
simple. Everything you add to production adds complication.
Yeah. I mean, I think this goes back to like maintenance Monday and spending time to like just clean up some stuff. If you had maintenance Monday, your PHP 5.4 app, you would have less of this problem. If you had maintenance Monday, your Django and Nginx and 2 or 3 different Apaches on these backends, and now it's like 6 servers. If you had maintenance Monday that a little bit, you could have paid down that debt in moderate increments instead of going, oh, fuck's sake. Well, now it's not going to cost me $200 to fix the problem. Now it's going to cost me $2,000. Make up bigger numbers.
Yep.
Agreed. Yeah, that's a wrap.